Welcome to the Voter Interest Project's candidate interviews for 2023. I'm Alan McPheeters, the Executive Director of the Voter Interest Project. Our mission is to provide voters with the information they need to make informed decisions about government, candidates, and ballot measures. Our focus is local. We cover Island County, its cities and towns, and various special districts, as well as the representatives from the 10th Legislative District. The 2023 elections are local and nonpartisan. We are covering 44 elective offices on this year's ballot, including mayors, city councilors, school board directors, and commissioners for hospital, port, fire, parks, and cemetery districts. 67 candidates filed for these offices during filing week in May, and we've invited all of them to do interviews for you. We also have extensive coverage of these elections and the actions of these government agencies on our website, voterinterests.com. The following interview is with Greg Richardson, the recently appointed commissioner in position 4 at the Whidbey Island Public Hospital District, who's running unopposed. We provided a list of questions to the candidate in advance of the interview. Well, good evening. Today is Thursday, August the 3rd, and we're here with Greg Richardson, who's running for Whidbey Island Public Hospital District Commissioner, position number 4. Greg, welcome to the Voter Interest Project.
Thanks very much for having me, Alan.
You bet. Where are you today? Are you at home or in an office? Or
I'm in what was my home office, but still my home. So it's the den on our house in Clinton.
In Clinton, outstanding. All right, let's open with a little biographical information, sort of set the table for people to get to know who you are. Are you married or single?
Very married. We grew up together since we're 15. We married when we were 20, and we've been married 53 years.
53 years, that's outstanding.
Yeah.
My wife and I are celebrating our anniversary in a couple of weeks, but we're not any close to 53 years. About half that, actually. Do you and your wife have children?
We have one son. He's 39. He's a commercial photographer. Unfortunately, had an accident that's put him in a wheelchair. He's paraplegic, unable to walk, but he's regained considerable amount of capability as a professional surfer. He holds the world's record of 43 feet for an adaptive surfer on a board with a kayak paddle, and he is the only certified tow-in driver on a Sea-Doo for these crazy guys that go into 50 to 100-foot waves in Nazaré, Portugal. And so that's where he lives. We just brought him to the airport yesterday with his girlfriend. They were here for 2 months. So
wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Very good. Now, were you raised here on Whidbey, or you moved here? How'd you come to be on Whidbey?
No. My wife and I both grew up in San Francisco, and we graduated both with degrees from San Jose State. My wife in nursing, and went on to become an OBGYN practitioner. And I had a degree in business finance and aeronautical engineering, subsequently got a master's in aeronautical engineering. We then went into the Air Force for 20 years, flew mostly F-15, have about 4,500 hours of fighter time, and made full colonel just before I retired in 1993, and then started my own business. So we had a nice career that spanned those 20 years or so, and luckily only about 6 moves, so that was good. But we got to experience both Asia and Germany for 2 years and 3 years respectively. That's
outstanding. That 6 moves seems a little low, so you did pretty well.
We're very fortunate. Yeah, you hear all the war stories, and that wasn't part of it. You know, I flew about 32 combat missions in the F-15 during the Gulf War, and was part of the planning cell. So that sort of slowed down the moves. But other than that, I think it was pretty standard career.
Very good. So I guess that takes care of the next question.
Yeah,
you serve in the military. You sure did. So after you left the military, you started a business?
I did. I was very disappointed. It's a little bit like the story you might ask for relative to the board here. I was disappointed in what I saw as the transition program that the Air Force had, and thought, as any arrogant fighter pilot, I'll just start my own business and we'll just make sure that everybody gets a decent transition program. So I started my little one-person company, AIM Associates, with a logo that one of my folks that worked for me at Tactical Air Command had designed, and I did that, providing outplacement. Almost none for the military because everything's free. So that was a bad calculation on my part. But it led to a number of exposures to business people, and did a fair amount of volunteering, was on several boards, and then was asked to start a human resource consulting division for what was Goodman and Company, became Dixon Hughes Goodman, and I retired from there in 2014 from Forbes, which is about the 8th largest public accounting firm in the United States. So out of 600 partners, I was their token non-CPA, and I ran about a 25 person human resource consulting group. So that was a big transition, lots of career coaching. Most of what I did, if it matters, was to facilitate strategic plans, facilitating compliance and ethics programs, and quite a few HR audits, and lots of HR consulting.
Very good. Okay. You said you served on some boards. What kind of boards did you serve on?
I was one of the founding members for the Achievable Dream program in Newport News. I was on the executive committee and board for the United Way, for the YMCA, for Star Achievers Academy, and trying to think if there's anything else I'd written down a note here. I think that might do it.
Funny, after a while,
yeah,
you get pointed to, well, show me your resume, and it's been a while since you made one.
I know.
I had a similar experience recently.
Yeah, but no elected positions. I'm not a political person in any way, shape, or form, and so I've never run for an office. So this has been an experience.
I'll bet. You got appointed to this seat last year in September?
It was in October. There were, I think, 8 applicants, and they interviewed 3 of us. I was in Portugal, so we did that by Zoom, and 2 others. And within a couple days or so, they had made a decision to have me fill that position on November 1st.
Very good. What made you decide to become a hospital commissioner?
Basically, very similar to what I said earlier about the Air Force's program. I became more and more concerned, speaking with neighbors, reading articles in the paper about the direction and the fiscal danger that the organization was in, and that was prior to Ron Tellis, which I believe you're familiar with that name.
Yeah.
And under Jerry Forbes, and went to several of the meetings with a couple folks, one of which is a very, very experienced board chair for Virginia Mason, and also the Children's Hospital. And we just couldn't believe our ears, and we both volunteered to do, I for free, I think he was maybe going to charge, a strategic plan for the board. Didn't get any response whatsoever. I don't think they wanted to spend the time in doing, certainly in my version, which is fairly belaborious. It's not a simple little half-day or all-day event. So I just sort of put that on hold, and the next thing, about a year and a half later, I saw that the position had come open. Somebody told me about it and applied for it, and the rest is history now.
Very good. So you came in at an interesting time, because it's about 6 months after Ron Tellis was asked to go away. Things had been, my sense of it as an outsider was that it wasn't good under Jerry Forbes, and it got worse under Ron Tellis.
That's accurate.
It's hard as an outsider not to see Ron Tellis as kind of the villain of the piece. Is that fair?
He's not so much. He was a nice person, very pleasant, but he lacked the competencies to be a CEO. And I think he got himself in trouble as the CFO. I call it for the board being asleep at the wheel. And he believed that he could, and this is my interpretation, I'm certainly not stating a fact, I think he believed he could pull the wool over the board's eyes in delaying the finalization of the cost report. And while it's technical and it's complicated, it's a fairly simple process. Every single time a bill goes to Medicare, let alone Medicaid, it's registered at being valued at X, and based on the services and the time and the cost and things like that. And Medicare is a very fast payer. They just pay you and you get the money. And so if you put a bill in for $100, they pay you the full $100, and times many millions, of course. At the end of each year, you are to account for and to close out, to audit, and to prove that you don't owe them any money, or perhaps they owe you more money. They didn't do that for 2 full years. And then they owed over $3.5 million.
Wow.
And all the while, he was the CFO and became the CEO. And of course, he certainly wouldn't have wanted to say what he had done as the CEO, because he was now earning some pretty decent bucks. I would like to earn that kind of money. And it became very clear that he was incompetent.
Yeah.
And the more incompetent he became, the more people rebelled against it, and the more people he fired. Without getting into a political discussion, we have a pretty good example of that right now in our past president.
Yeah.
So it was really terrible. And fortunately, the wheels fell off. It wasn't just one flat tire. All four wheels fell off, and that got the board's attention. And they just said, "What have we done?" And that was that. So that was the beginning of what we're seeing now, which I'm happy to explain some based on whatever questions you might have.
Sure. So he was not giving the board the information they needed. Did the board lack the expertise to ask, or did they not know?
I've never really gotten the kind of information that leads me to be able to answer that comfortably. I think it was a combination of things, mostly excuses. And he was pretty artful, apparently. And so it would always be, yeah, that's going to be in 3 months, and they've given us an extension, and we're looking at this, and then, and weeks turn into months, and months turn into a year, and then all of a sudden, bang, the floodgates open, and it's realized. Remember, though, there's a hospital run, so there's a lot of moving parts. It's not just finances. It's not just hiring good providers, etc. It's not just having a good facility. I mean, there's many, and if there's anything I've learned just in the less than a year, 9-10 months now, it's that. So even a public district hospital, or what we call or known as a critical access hospital, Whidbey Island, there's 39 of them in the state. By the way, over 21 of them are in jeopardy of closure, and we're not. Wow. So that's not a bad thing to know right now.
Yeah.
There was probably a time that might have been not the case. So it's very, very important to realize that as each month goes through, and I'll show you later if you're interested, there's many benchmarks to look at. There's all types of issues associated with supplies, equipment, depreciation, aging, finances, revenue, accounts receivable, etc. All of the assessments, etc. All the compliance and ethics, credentialing, bylaws, hundreds of policies, etc. There are lots of things, and all in an environment. The new CEO has a graph that it's pretty cute. It's so complex with the number of agencies in excess of 200 on one graph that you can't read almost any of it, but it's true. And that's what's alive and well. You have the Department of Health, and you've got Medicare, Medicaid, and you've got so many other smaller agencies that have, let alone state and federal, and all of them have requirements, all of them have inspectors, all of them have expectations, and many times they cross paths, etc. And these folks, in this hospital, they have to take care of all of it. They have a very, very tough job. And at any point that I would have some community member on Whidbey Island start to denigrate and make simple, I want to be able to be there when he or she says that, because I'm going to take them on. Yeah. I'll be happy to take them on when they just don't understand how complex it is. And then you add to that the demands of the emergency department and the critical need that people have when they're sick, and something unexpected happens in their life. And then you add to that EMS, or having to helicopter, or to have to triage and make decisions on whether or not we can keep them, given the service capability and the technical competencies in a critical access hospital versus a full for-profit hospital. So it's again, I'll be happy to answer any questions. As you can tell, I speak quickly. Your listeners are probably slowing down everything, but
no, the takeaway from that is that there's a compliance nightmare, and that kind of prompts me to ask the question: is it even possible in the long term, for a small facility like this to meet all its compliant obligations and continue to be in business?
The answer is yes, and it's emphatic yes. What it takes is good, strong leadership in terms of the motivation, the direction, the enthusiasm, and the overall culture that the CEO establishes within the healthcare system. That's number one. Number two, it takes competencies at compliance and in ethics and in quality, et cetera, risk management, which we have. I mean, we've got a couple of people that are just spectacular and with great support systems, and they've been totally impressive. And so as long as they're actively engaged and they're providing the kinds of feedback that we need, which again, I'll be happy to answer questions about the difference between what board members do versus the management. It's very important. It's one of my biggest lessons that I have to learn every day. And so as long as you stay on top of that, they can't, this is only a 30-minute piece, so I can't show you the things, but if this were a presentation, I'd be popping up a slide right now and I'd say, please look at our quality ratings versus the other 39 hospitals, and you will be astounded. We are off the charts, which doesn't mean there's not room for improvement, which doesn't mean there's not disappointments, especially in emergency situations. And of course, if you get sick, Alan, you're the most important person in the world. As soon as you walk into the emergency room, nobody else, no matter what happens to them, mattered. Only Alan should get the service. And of course, there's 42 other Allens that particular day. So that part's tough, but our quality ratings are and they're coming up all the time. And we have benchmarks that are national and state benchmarks, which we compare ourselves as about 40 different ratings, and we're briefed on those every meeting. We're cutting down on briefings, and I've got I'll just show you here, and we can talk about it later. That is, if you can see that, okay.
Yep.
So that is 15 financial indicators that I requested 1 month after I started, so that we could, on a monthly basis, compare every single one of these key KPIs, key performance indicators and financial benchmarks against national averages and against our previous month. And we are just slowly but surely moving across from a fair amount of red to predominantly green, which doesn't mean we snooze, doesn't mean we're taking it for granted, but everybody in the operational management group, starting with the CEO, knows the five of us are paying attention like never before. So that's one of the things that we're doing.
Outstanding. That I had no idea. I knew it was probably more complicated than I was aware of. I had no idea how complex it was. And yet, so I did the same kind of an interview with Morgan Cooper 2 nights ago.
Okay.
And I asked her this question. And I my sense of her background, your background, maybe she's better suited to figure out how to deal with this problem. But my wife and I moved to Whidbey in 2016. Not long after that, my mother-in-law was over. We were having a family get-together. She took a little tumble, and we needed to take her to the emergency room. She was adamant that we go to Island Hospital in Anacortes. Did not want any part of WhidbeyHealth. And in the time that I've lived here, that's, at least in the group of people that I see, that's a pretty common feeling. So you're making progress with your indicators. I don't know how much that's funneling out to the public. How do you get that word out? Because clearly we need to have this. It's called a critical access hospital for a reason. You need to have a strong functioning hospital on Whidbey. Maybe we have one now, but nobody knows about it. What do we do?
Sure. So let me just answer that by telling you a little bit of a comparison. Marketing is all about communicating. Brand, capabilities, features, you name it. And as you mentioned, this is Morgan's background, so she's very, very skilled and learned it. And that's great. But when bad information is the most prevalent, you don't market that. And so you stop marketing, you stop communicating. However, people have a need to know when it's bad. And so they start uncovering the dirt, which they did. And now all of a sudden you start to revert to a positive track record, and you're hiring good people. People are coming back. You're correcting the financial woes of, you're putting in safeguards and performance indicators. You're evaluating all the services. You're expanding. You're moving to what I call cradle to grave, which I'll be happy to describe. And we're behind from the standpoint of spreading the word that is now developing. Okay? And so, for example, if I were to ask how many people know, could they have a baby at WhidbeyHealth, they'd say, I don't know. But we have 3 OBGYNs and other providers there. We didn't have any a little while ago. What if I had a urology need? As of this month, we have a 25-year urologist. I need a family practice doctor. I've been trying to get seen at Everett. We now have multitudes of family practice physicians, let alone PAs and NPs. And we've in 5 different clinics where we had 2. So if you heard anything from Morgan, not to speak for her, I'm assuming that you should have heard, we have as one of our #1 priorities beginning to market successfully and communicate to our community the story that they need to know. Capabilities, competencies, skill levels, types of services, etc. And in so doing, the trust will be regained as it should. It's deserved. And there's good numbers associated with almost everything. Which again, I don't want to say is infallibility. Don't mean that somebody can't be mean to somebody or have a bad day. We've all been there, but overall, you should see trend indicators that are very positive.
Very good. One of the problems with the district, with the system, has been revenues. Now, clearly there have been some strides made on getting the billing done and those other things. I gather that part of the strategy to deal with that is expanding services. You've added urology, you opened the walk-in clinic down in Freeland, some other things like that. I don't know if those are money makers yet or will be in the future, but one of the things Ron Tellis had mentioned at one point was that maybe the district should explore selling out to a for-profit hospital organization. Do you think that makes sense, or is it viable?
Yeah, I don't, for a variety of reasons. #1, based on demographics, the island itself is small. There's only so many people that will want to come to work here. So to take it outside of support from the community in terms of having a critical access hospital, which means that we as a community, even though we don't all vote, loudly, and we don't all know everything, we as a community need to have the ability to gain the access to critical care on a moment's notice, let alone a little bit lengthier care. Well, that takes into account public support, it takes into account taxation, and it takes into account reimbursements from government agencies, Medicare, Medicaid, different types of grants, etc. Almost none of that would be available on a for-profit basis, let alone they would have to staff this place with people, instead of going to, a big metropolis like Seattle. And so keeping it on a not-for-profit, government-related, community-related, but keeping it tight and small enough to where, and that's one of the things, and I'd have to take more time than we probably have, but balancing the types of services and the degree of specialization and the level of competency of a provider, et cetera, is just critical to it. Because as soon as you get past a certain point, your overhead can go off the charts and your revenues will lag. Now you have a cash flow issue, which is where I'm beamed in like nobody's business. I am all about cash flow, and not as in greed, but cash flow is king. And so if you overextend your providers and the services, and you lag behind the amount of reimbursements you're going to get by more than a few months, you can go out of business in a heartbeat. So that's where we are. We're trying to sort of leap, it's kind of like a little rubber band. You just keep pulling it and you stretch by adding a provider, adding a service, buying some equipment, et cetera. And then here's the revenues. And now you got to market it, which is where we are. And then the revenues start to come in, given that you have anywhere from a 45 to 70-day lag from billing to receipt. And if you add to that, one of our biggest issues that we faced, and they did not do well, is that we have really emphasized coding. revenue enhancements from a standpoint of making sure that every single penny that's deserved to be billed for is being built. And that was not the case before. They were probably under by at least 10, 15, maybe as much as 20% for any given procedure in the way it was built. So all within above board, but we're going to make sure that we optimize revenues and every other way in which we can get money. So right now we're, I think one of the questions that you had is what are some of, my big priorities? And right now we're sitting at somewhere around 40 on any given month, anywhere from 35 to 45 or so days cash on hand.
Mhm.
And my goal is that by the end of by 2025, so a year and a half from now, we should be sitting at a minimum of 100 to 125 days. And that's reasonably healthy. And we're on our way to do that.
You've taken my next question, which is what is the benchmark that you're going to use for your success? See, so you're up for election this year. This is a 6-year term.
Right.
So in 2029, if you decided to come back to the voters and say, I want to keep doing this, what do you want to be able to point to say, this is what we've accomplished while I've been in this chair. This is why you should keep me. Clearly, one of them is that cash flow number. Are there others?
Sure. Retention, which we've improved dramatically over the last year. Our retention is at our turnover is at 12%. That's extremely good. Number two, that are, again, going back to your comment and the one we talked about, days cash on hand, reduction in debt, which we're working on. We have a potential to get a considerable amount of rebate from the government based on the PII that came up by maintaining work for people and the associated revenues. So, somewhere possibly up to $10 million in the next 6 months. So credit rating, we need to make sure our bond rating is back up. It's already gone up some. Reduction in debt, and then line of credit for sure, because obviously if you can do that, then a line of credit is the equivalent of cash, but you're not paying any interest on it because you haven't taken it out. So that's huge. The maintenance, let alone the increase in all the quality measurements, the absence of failures associated with Department of Health or any of our DNV's accreditation, which is significant. The low number of physicians whose credentials are either not given is not as bad as withdrawn, because obviously if you're doing your job right, I'm on the credentialing committee, and that's a critical area. And the folks that are on it, the physicians and other providers, are just painstaking in how they assess a physician, a potential physician or other provider, nurse practitioner and physician assistant, whether or not they will receive credentials according to our bylaws. And quite often somebody doesn't meet the grade and they're not given it. So that part's very, very strict, because you just can't have that reputation. And then the last thing is reputation in the community. In other words, at the end of 3 years for me, 3.5 years total, I should be able to walk around this community and have the vast majority knowledgeable that we're a very trusted member of the community as far as an organization, that they would be comfortable going there, that somebody they knew that was there has been there. And I have to tell you, every once in a while I've left my badge on after a board meeting and gone to 2 weeks ago was at Skagit, and there were about 5 people in line, and this lady saw me and she goes, "What are you? Oh, you're a commissioner." Because I want to just tell you that my life was saved there, and so was my husband's, and my daughter was there. She just wouldn't stop, And so I said, "Well, why don't you take your badge off and come with me? I need to have somebody make a video of you." But it was cute. So of course, there's the opposite stories, but giving a very credible partner in the healthcare provisions happens to be on this island, giving them / us a break by some of the diehards, who are just vociferous in their fussing about this and that, and they're welcome to do what they want, but most of them don't put their money where their mouth is. They just flap. You don't see them running for boards. You don't send them, they're just editorial stuff. So they're welcome to do that stuff all they want. But at some point, it might be nice to get a break and come and see how much things are changed. But we're in it to win it. And the board is reconstituted. There's several people that are up for election with competitors, and we'll see what happens there. But we're doing our level best to make sure we pay attention to things that are on the strategic governance side, not on the operational management side, which I alluded to earlier. Okay. And that starts with just the relationship. I know we're running out of time. The relationship between the board and the CEO. And that's the last point I'm going to make. Good. Morgan, me, and the other commissioners, we can ask the CEO all the questions we want. Only us as a board, 5-member board, can we tell him something or direct something. And so it's really, really, and we couldn't be more excited about our new CEO, Nathan Staggs, and our new CFO, Paul Rogers. We're so lucky. They are a winning team. And if we don't do well with them, I don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do.
That's fair. I remember because I watched the interviews when you got when you and the other two candidates were interviewed, and I think Ron Wallen said, we have, as a board, we have one employee, the CEO. Everything else that happens here all goes to him. He's the only one that we really. And that makes a lot of sense. Important that kind of separation.
Yeah, in my world, we called that who's the throat to choke. we only have one, and that's poor Nathan.
Very good. You're right. We're getting close to out of time, but I have one, maybe two more questions. Hopefully, we can keep them pretty brief. Question number one: you'd mentioned $10 million worth of I think potential additional refunds that the district could get from the federal government, I think, out of Medicare. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, it's not Medicare. It's they're just about finished, and we have a preliminary approval that right now is just being processed for all organizations that had approximately, I think it was 550 employees during the pandemic, and they kept them employed. And so they evaluate and they go through, and I think it's $26,000. So it's it's very common. But if that comes through, as we are hopeful that it will, that's gonna allow for some debt retirement and for several things that need to be, and it's going to be one of the biggest areas that the board will jump in on versus the management. And we're going to really look at, one of our commissioners, James Golders, on the finance committee, as is Morgan, and they'll be spending a fair amount of time. I certainly plan to be involved, but that'll be one of their primary things, is to look at cost benefit. Is it better to have it just as cash, or do we, pay down debt here? Do we invest in this? Because there's a number of things. And one of the things that I really want to emphasize over the next couple of years is the facility itself. We have a superb evaluation that was conducted several years ago and has everything prioritized for renovation, remodeling, reconstitution, replacement, et cetera. And so that part is all done. Now we just need to squeeze out the dollars, which again, it's hard. There's no big benefactor just throwing in millions and millions of dollars for new carpet and painting and a number of other things. And we have part of the building brand new, but we have a lot of facilities that wear out, and so it's time to start spending some money.
That makes sense. How much? What are the overall revenues of the hospital district to give that 10 million some
150-ish million?
Okay, so that's a pretty substantial amount of money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of expenses. 42 to 44% just based on employees, staff. So that's the goal is to never get it above 50 if you can, and it's very rare to be below 35 to 38. But so it's sitting in that thing, but it's a chunk of change. And we have, the staff morale is way up. The culture has changed significantly. people are addressing it in a variety of ways, et cetera, because we know how important it is to make sure that people are in a workplace that they enjoy, that they feel honored and trusted, empowered, and that they feel that they're fairly treated, and listened to, et cetera. It's no cosmic magic,
Yeah.
but it's mostly about the leadership qualities and behaviors of the average supervisor that influences the people below them, and of course then the same thing goes up above. So a lot of professional developments on the near horizon to try and emphasize leadership development.
Outstanding. I think that's probably where we should cut off then. So
Okay.
the last question is nothing to do with the hospital district, but if people want to learn more about you, your campaign and all of that, what's the best place for them to look? Do you have a website or a Facebook page or any of that kind of stuff?
No, I've got the standard LinkedIn thing, which, I'm not overly involved in it. They're welcome to ask me at my email. Can I do my email or?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's Greg, Greg, as in mother, Richardson, Greg M. Richardson at live.com. They're more than welcome. I don't know anybody that's not received an answer within 24 hours from me ever in my life. So I'll be more than happy to respond. And if they want to get on the phone or meet in person, happy to do it. That's just goes without saying. I mean, it was sort of funny. One of the groups that was assessing candidates said, "Do you feel that you're an employee of the community?" I said, "No, not at all. Employees get paid. So if you want to start paying me, you can call me an employee, but I am a servant of the community and I represent their interests completely, and I do get that. So I'm running it for them."
Outstanding. Thank you so much for taking this time. I know we've been a little long, but I think it was really worthwhile.
No, you're very welcome. Yeah, great to do it.
All right. We'll be in touch, and good luck with your campaign. You're doing them. I have a background in politics. I used to be a political party leader here, and I've always admired. I've always aimed, if I were going to run for anything, aim to run unopposed. It's the easiest kind of campaign.
Well, I never aim for it, but I certainly am thankful. I'm very thankful.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for watching our interview with Greg Richardson, who's running for commissioner position number 4 at the Whidbey Island Public Hospital District, WhidbeyHealth. We invite you to subscribe to our newsletter, available in 4 local editions: Camino Island, North Whidbey, Central Whidbey, and South Whidbey. The newsletter arrives in your mailbox every Monday morning with news and events from your part of Island County. Subscribe to our newsletter at voterinterest.com/subscribe. And look for more of these candidate interviews as the election season continues. Thank you and good night.